The storm raged like a beast of its own, ripping through the forest with merciless winds. Trees groaned, branches snapped, and the earth turned to mud under the pounding rain. Through the chaos staggered a lone wolf, his massive frame trembling with exhaustion. Silver-tipped arrows pierced his side, blood mingling with rainwater as he dragged himself through the darkness. He was no ordinary creature. Behind those wild eyes burned a secret no one in the kingdom could ever know. Each step was agony, each breath a battle, until at last he collapsed in the shadow of a crumbling cottage on the edge of the woods. His body shuddered, his life slipping away with the storm. Inside the cottage, Elara, a poor village girl with hands worn from endless labor, heard the faintest whimper. At first she thought it was the wind, but then it came again, softer, broken, desperate. Despite her fear, her heart, always too kind for its own good, pulled her outside into the rain. There, beneath the twisted roots of an oak, she found him, the great black wolf, his fur matted with blood, his breath ragged. Any other villager would have run screaming, but Elara knelt beside him, eyes wide with pity. "Easy, easy, boy," she whispered, as if speaking to a wounded stray. The wolf did not growl. He only gazed at her with haunting eyes that seemed far too knowing, too human. Against every warning her father had ever given her, she pulled him into the shelter of her cottage. Her hands trembled as she cleaned his wounds with torn cloth and rainwater, whispering soft comfort, though she knew he could not understand. And yet, he did not move, did not strike, only watched her as if her touch anchored him to life. Hours passed, thunder rolling into silence, until at last the storm broke. Elara, weary but resolute, finished tending to the stranger she never should have saved. She brushed damp hair from her face and leaned closer, checking his breathing. That was when she saw it, his eyes. No longer the dull, fading gaze of a dying wolf, but glowing, molten gold. Eyes that mirrored a man's soul staring back at her. Her breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary beast. His golden eyes locked on hers, and for the first time, Elara realized she had brought something far more dangerous than a wounded animal into her home. Morning broke gently, sunlight spilling across the small cottage like a hesitant guest. Elara stirred from restless sleep, her first thought returning to the creature she had dragged from death's edge. Fear should have clawed at her heart, but instead, curiosity and something softer kept her steps quiet as she moved to his side. The wolf lay where she had left him, chest rising slowly, eyes half open as though he had not slept at all. When she whispered, "You survived," she swore the flick of his ear was not by chance. Over the next days, the strangeness grew. When she spoke, he seemed to listen, tilting his great head as though considering her words. Once, when she asked softly if he was thirsty, he dragged himself, weak but determined, toward the water bowl she set down. Another time, when she dropped a tool by accident, the wolf's paw slid it back toward her with a motion too deliberate for an animal. Elara tried to laugh it off, but deep within, unease stirred like a shadow she dared not name. But the most unsettling thing of all was his protectiveness. When strangers passed by the cottage, the wolf's ears pricked, muscles tensing. He never attacked, but he placed himself between Elara and the door, a silent guardian watching with golden fire in his eyes. Once, when a villager boy wandered too close, the wolf's low growl sent the child running. Elara scolded him gently, but as she did, she could not shake the feeling that he understood her chastisement, because the wolf lowered his head in what seemed almost like shame. Still, she told no one. How could she? To reveal him would bring hunters, and hunters meant death. Yet every time she met those strange, human-like eyes, a question gnawed at her. What are you, truly? That night, as the fire dwindled and shadows stretched across the walls, Elara sat stitching an old garment. The wolf lay nearby, his breathing steady, though his gaze never strayed from her. She hummed a tune her mother once sang, a melody of sorrow and warmth. And for the first time, she felt truly not alone. Then it happened. She glanced up at the flicker of the hearth, and her needle stilled. On the wall behind him, the wolf's shadow wavered, not of a beast, but of a man. Broad-shouldered, kneeling, with hands instead of paws. She blinked, heart hammering, and in an instant it was gone, leaving only the familiar silhouette of a wolf stretched across the stone. Elara's lips parted in silence. She whispered to the dark, voice trembling, "You're not what you seem, are you?" The wolf lifted his head, eyes burning gold in the firelight, as though her words had finally pierced the last veil between them. The cottage felt smaller with every passing night, as though the weight of secrets pressed down on its fragile wooden walls. Elara barely slept anymore. She would rise at odd hours to find the wolf watching her, golden eyes reflecting the dying firelight. They were not the eyes of an animal, too sharp, too sorrowful, too knowing. A part of her longed to turn away, to pretend she had never dragged him from the storm. But another part, the gentler part, couldn't forget the way he shielded her from strangers, how his growl silenced danger, how his silent presence filled the lonely corners of her heart. On the third night, as rain whispered across the roof, she whispered into the silence, "What are you?" The wolf stirred, muscles tense, as though her words unlocked something long buried. Slowly, painfully, he rose to his feet. Elara's breath caught when the glow in his eyes deepened, spilling like molten fire. The air grew heavy, the shadows quivered, and before her terrified gaze, the wolf's form began to shift. Bones cracked, fur receded, sinew twisted. Where a beast had stood, now knelt a man, bloodied, scarred, shackled with iron bands that still clung to his wrists as though forged by unseen chains. Elara stumbled back, her heart racing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair plastered to his pale skin. His golden eyes, the same eyes, pierced hers, but now they held the weight of unbearable sorrow. "Don't be afraid," he said, voice rough with disuse, yet gentle. "I will not harm you." Elara's hands shook as she clutched the table behind her for balance. You're cursed," she whispered. A bitter smile crossed his face. "Cursed to be both beast and man, to live hunted, chained by sins that were never mine." He raised his bound wrists, the broken shackles rattling softly. "My name is Kaelen." She should have screamed, should have run into the night and told the village what monster she harbored. But her mind betrayed her, remembering the wolf bleeding at her doorstep, remembering his silence as she tended his wounds, remembering the way he stood guard like a shield of flesh and fur. Fear warred with gratitude, dread with pity. Kaelen bowed his head, as though ashamed. "If you wish me gone, say the word, and I will leave. Better the forest's teeth than your hatred." Elara's lips parted, but no words came. Her heart pounded, her breath uneven. She saw not a beast, but a broken warrior trapped in a prison not of his making. And in her silence, she made the choice not to betray him, not yet, but fate had already turned its gaze. That very night, voices rose outside the cottage. Torchlight flickered through the cracks in the shutters. Villagers, muttering of shadows and strange tracks, drew closer. As Kaelen turned toward the window, the torchlight caught his face. The villagers froze, eyes widening as they saw the cursed man standing near Elara's home. The knock on the door came like a thunderclap, loud, furious, demanding. Elara froze where she stood, her heart hammering as shouts echoed outside. "Open up! We've seen him! The beast lurks here!" Kaelen's jaw tightened, golden eyes narrowing. He moved toward the door, but Elara grabbed his arm, her voice urgent and trembling. "If they see you, they'll kill you." Outside, The mob swelled, men clutching pitchforks, women whispering prayers, children clinging to their mothers' skirts. Fear had spread like wildfire through the village. Whispers of strange shadows, of glowing eyes in the woods, had grown into a tale of a monster hidden among them. Now, with torches blazing, they sought proof. Elara opened the door just enough to step outside, forcing a smile that wavered under the torchlight. "There's nothing here but me," she insisted. "No beast, no danger. You're letting fear blind you." But suspicion clung to the crowd like smoke. An elder stepped forward, voice sharp. "We saw him, girl. Tall as a man, eyes like fire. Are you harboring it? Are you bringing death upon us all?" Elara shook her head, but her trembling gave her away. Murmurs rose, accusations of witchcraft, betrayal, treason against their safety. Behind her, Kaelen's shadow shifted, barely contained within the cottage. The sight of it through the window made a boy cry out in terror. "There, behind her!" The mob surged. Elara turned, but Kaelen was already moving. His eyes burned with fierce resolve. "I will not bring ruin upon you," he whispered, stepping past her into the night. The villagers gasped as the cursed man emerged, his scars gleaming in the firelight, iron shackles clinking with every step. Panic erupted. "Monster! Demon!" Voices rose in a storm of fear and hatred. Stones flew, striking his shoulders, but Kaelen did not fight back. Instead, he broke into a run, his powerful frame vanishing into the dark embrace of the forest. Torches scattered after him, the mob crying for blood. Elara's cries were lost in the chaos. "Stop! He means no harm!" But no one listened. To them, compassion was folly, and fear was law. Deeper into the woods, Kaelen's breath grew ragged, the silver wounds on his body burning anew with every stride. He knew the hunters would not relent. To them, his very existence was a crime. The night closed in, the forest thick with shadows and the smell of wet earth. For a moment, silence, then the sharp crack of metal. A trap snapped shut around his leg, its silver edges biting deep. Kaelen roared in pain, stumbling as another trap clamped onto his arm. From the trees, figures emerged, hunters cloaked in black, eyes cold, crossbows gleaming with silver bolts. Bound by the cruel bite of silver, Kaelen fell to his knees as the hunters closed in, their weapons aimed at his heart. Snow fell heavy that night, softening the world under a white shroud. The hunters had driven Kaelen deep into the forest, their silver bolts leaving wounds that refused to close. Each step was a battle, his breath steaming in the freezing air. Shackled by pain and chains both real and unseen, he pushed onward, determined not to die at their hands. If death must claim him, it would be on his own terms, not in a pit of scorn. He staggered through the trees, ears pricked at a faint sound, a child's cry. At first, he thought it a trick of his fevered mind, but then it came again, sharp and terrified, echoing through the snow-laden woods. Against reason, Kaelen followed. In a clearing, a small boy huddled near a fallen log, eyes wide with terror as a pack of wild beasts circled, wolves twisted by hunger, their fur ragged, their eyes gleaming with madness. The boy's torch had fallen, sputtering in the snow. The beasts drew closer, teeth bared. Kaelen could have turned away. He owed these villagers nothing but silence. Yet something deep within, the part of him that still remembered honor, the part chained but unbroken, moved his battered body forward. With a roar, he leapt between the beasts and the child. Claws tore his flesh, teeth sank into his arm, but he fought with a fury born of desperation. Golden fire flared in his eyes, his cursed strength cutting through the wild pack. Snow turned crimson beneath him as his wounds reopened, blood steaming in the frozen night. At last, the beasts scattered, fleeing into the shadows. Kaelen staggered, barely standing, as the child whimpered at his feet. He knelt, his voice ragged but gentle. "Go, run home. You're safe now." The boy fled into the trees, leaving Kaelen to collapse into the snow. His strength was gone, his vision darkening. But before the cold could claim him, a pair of hands lifted his head. Elara. She had followed his trail through the storm, guided by nothing but faith and fear for him. "Fool," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You risk your life for those who would kill you." Her hands pressed against his wounds, desperate to stop the bleeding. He tried to speak, but she silenced him. "Save your strength. I'll not let you die." She dragged him back toward the cottage, every step heavy with danger, her small frame straining under his weight. At last, inside, she laid him upon her bed, tending his wounds with trembling care. His breaths were shallow, his eyes dim, but when they flickered open, they found her face, and for the first time, he allowed himself a broken smile. It was then the door creaked open. Elara froze, bloodied hands still pressed against Kaelen's wounds. In the doorway stood her father, eyes wide with horror and fury as he took in the sight. His daughter bent over the cursed man. His voice thundered through the room. "What have you done, Elara?" The fire sputtered in the hearth, casting long shadows that trembled across the walls. Elara's father stood in the doorway, his weathered face carved with lines of fury and fear. His eyes fixed on Kaelen sprawled across the bed, bloodied and pale, his chain still clinging to his wrists. "Elara," he whispered, his voice heavy with disbelief, "what have you brought into my house?" She rose slowly, her hands still red from tending Kaelen's wounds. "He would have died, father. I couldn't—" "You couldn't what?" he thundered, slamming the door behind him. "Couldn't let a monster meet its end. Do you not see? This thing has cursed blood. The village whispers already. If they find him here, they'll burn our home to the ground, and us with it." Elara flinched but held her ground. "He is not a monster. He saved a child tonight. He bleeds. He suffers. He deceives," her father snapped, his face darkening. "That is what such creatures do. They twist pity into chains. You think he cares for you? He is danger made flesh." Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. "I have seen his heart. He is more human than those who throw stones in fear." For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the ragged breath of Kaelen, who stirred faintly, but said nothing. The old man's gaze softened, just for a heartbeat, as he looked at his daughter, his only child, her face so much like her mother's had been. But his voice, when it came, was firm. "Choose, Elara. Your family, your people, or this cursed creature. You cannot keep both." Her heart tore within her. To obey was to betray Kaelen, to abandon him to death. To defy was to break the bond with the only family she had left. She trembled, torn, but when her eyes fell on Kaelen's broken form, she knew she could not leave him. "I will not let him die," she whispered, voice quivering yet resolute. "Even if it costs me everything." Her father's face hardened like stone. He turned away, shaking his head. "Then you are no daughter of mine." The words struck like a blade, but before Elara could respond, the sound of iron-shod boots broke the night. Shouts rose outside, torches flickering against the window panes. Soldiers, king's men, had come, their voices sharp and commanding. "Open in the name of the crown! We seek the beast that hides among you!" Elara's blood ran cold as her father's eyes met hers, fearful, accusing, and filled with the knowledge that their secret was about to be exposed. The pounding on the door shook the cottage, each blow rattling Elara's bones. The soldiers' voices cut through the night like blades. "By order of the crown, surrender the beast, or we will tear this place apart." Elara's father pressed his back against the door, his hands trembling. "They know. They will search Elara. There's no hiding him now." Kaelen stirred from the bed, his golden eyes weary but clear. He pulled himself upright, his movements slow and deliberate. The chains on his wrists clinked with every step as he crossed the room. "This is not your fight," he rasped. "I will not let them destroy you for my sake." Elara caught his arm, her voice breaking. "No, if you go out there, they'll kill you. Please, Kaelen, there must be another way." He looked down at her, his scarred face etched with something between sorrow and tenderness. "I have been hunted all my life. But you gave me kindness. That is worth more than my freedom." His hand, warm despite his wounds, brushed hers away gently. "Let me protect you, as you once protected me." The door splintered under the soldier's strikes. Her father shouted for her to move aside, but Elara stood frozen, tears streaking her face as Kaelen turned and walked toward the breaking door. When it burst open, torches flaring, the soldiers recoiled for an instant at the sight of him. A man bound in broken chains, his golden eyes glowing like molten fire. Yet Kaelen did not fight. He raised his shackled hands high. "I am the one you seek. Leave them. I surrender." The soldiers wasted no mercy. They bound him in heavier chains, silver links that seared his skin. Iron collars clamped around his neck, dragging him to his knees. Elara cried out, but her father seized her shoulders, holding her back as Kaelen was hauled into the night. Torches lit the path as the convoy moved, soldiers marching with grim purpose, their prisoner stumbling in their midst. Villagers poured into the streets, jeering, spitting, hurling curses at the beast. Kaelen bore it all in silence, his head bowed, his dignity unbroken even in chains. From the shadows, Elara slipped free of her father's grasp. Heart hammering, she darted after the soldiers, her cloak drawn tight, her footsteps light as falling snow. She would not let him vanish into the jaws of the city alone. As the convoy's torches disappeared into the distance, Elara followed in secret, unaware of the peril awaiting her in the heart of the king's domain. The city roared with life, but its heart was cruel. At dawn, Kaelen was dragged through iron gates into a place built for blood, the arena of beasts. The stone pit yawned wide before him, ringed with towering walls. Above, nobles in silken robes lounged on gilded seats, goblets in hand, their laughter sharp as knives. Around them surged a crowd of commoners, their hunger for violence as fierce as wolves at the scent of prey. Chains clinked as guards shoved Kaelen into the dust. His shackles had been replaced with crueler bonds, etched with runes that burned his skin. From every corner came the stench of fear, for cages lined the walls, holding other creatures, twisted things of fang and claw, condemned to slaughter for the noble's amusement. "Behold," cried the herald, his voice echoing across the pit, "the cursed wolf-man, scourge of the forest. Tonight, he will prove if the beast bleeds like a man." The crowd erupted in cheers. Hidden among them, Elara pressed herself into the shadows. She had followed the convoy through treacherous paths, bribed her way into the city, and now stood in the stands, her hood pulled low. Her eyes locked on Kaelen, her Kaelen, battered, shackled, yet standing tall despite the weight of his chains. Her heart screamed for him, but her lips dared not. The gates clanged open. A monstrous bear, its fur matted, its eyes red with unnatural rage, lumbered into the pit. The crowd howled in delight. Guards struck Kaelen with pikes, forcing him forward. The fight was merciless. Kaelen moved with the grace of a warrior, every strike deliberate, every dodge costing him blood. The bear's claws raked his chest. Silver-tipped spears prodded him when he faltered, and still he fought, not for victory, but for survival. The crowd's cheers blurred into a storm of cruelty. Elara's nails dug into her palms as tears stung her eyes. She wanted to scream that this was not justice, but torture, that this man they mocked had risked everything to save even their children. But her voice would have been drowned in the madness. At last, Kaelen drove the bear to the ground, both of them collapsing in blood and dust. The creature lay still, and for a heartbeat, silence held the arena. Then the nobles cried for more. "Another beast! Push him further!" The gates opened again. This time 2 creatures emerged, wolf-like horrors, their forms warped by dark magic. Kaelen's chains rattled as he forced himself upright, his body trembling with exhaustion. He struck, fought, bled, but his strength waned. Then it happened. His breath came ragged, his body convulsed, and the golden glow in his eyes flared into wild fire. His hands curled into claws, his form trembling at the edge of something darker. The beast within clawed at its cage, hungry to be free. Elara's heart stopped as she whispered, "No. Kaelen, don't lose yourself." In the dust and blood of the arena, Kaelen's body began to twist, his face contorting, his chains straining, as the cursed beast within surged dangerously close to breaking free. The arena shook with frenzy as Kaelen's body writhed in the dust. His chains groaned, threatening to snap, his chest heaving with a sound no longer human. The golden blaze in his eyes deepened into fire, wild and unchained. His teeth lengthened, claws splitting skin, muscles twisting as the curse pressed against the fragile shell of his humanity. The nobles leaned forward, delighted. "Yes! Let the beast out!" one lord bellowed. "Tear the pit apart!" The crowd howled in agreement, their cheers like fuel to the fire gnawing at Kaelen's soul. Elara's heart hammered in her chest. From the shadows of the stands, she saw it happening. The man she had nursed back from death, who had shielded a child with his own blood, was slipping away into something monstrous. If he gave in here, before the eyes of the city, he would be condemned forever. Her throat burned, but she did not hesitate. Against fear, against sense, against the roar of thousands, Elara lifted her voice. "Kaelen!" The name cracked through the noise like a blade. Heads turned, guards stiffened, but her eyes were only on him. She pushed past gasps and glares, her voice trembling yet steady. "You are not a beast. You are a man. You are Kaelen, my Kaelen. Hold on." For an instant, silence rippled through the crowd, shock stealing their breath. Kaelen froze mid-transformation, his snarling face faltering. His golden eyes flickered, dimming from wildfire to a fragile glow. His trembling hands unclenched, and his breath came ragged. Not a monster's growl, but a man's desperate gasp. The mob broke the silence with cruel laughter. "Did you hear her?" someone jeered. "The girl loves the monster." Others took up the chant, voices dripping venom. "Beasts love her, beasts love her." Their mockery rolled through the arena, crueler than any chain. Elara's cheeks flushed, but she did not waver. Her hands gripped the stone rail, her voice rising again, strong as prayer. "I will not deny him. Call me what you wish. He is not the monster you make him to be." Kaelen's eyes locked on hers. The madness receded, his trembling eased, and the beast within shrank back into its cage. His form steadied, still scarred, still chained, but human. The nobles murmured uneasily, some scoffing, others whispering of witchcraft. But above them all, a single voice cut through the noise, deep, commanding, cold. The king himself had risen from his throne of carved bone and gold. His crown glinted in the light as his gaze settled on Elara. His lip curled, disdain and curiosity mingling in his eyes. "Bring me the girl," he said, his voice low but carrying like thunder. Gasps spread through the crowd. Guards moved instantly, shoving their way through the stands. Elara's heart pounded as armored hands closed in. She had saved Kaelen from the beast within, but in doing so, she had delivered herself into the jaws of the king. Elara was dragged from the stands like prey, her cries swallowed by the roar of the mob. Guards shoved her through the iron gates, down narrow passages slick with blood and sweat, until she was hurled into the heart of the arena. Dust clung to her cloak as she stumbled, blinking against the harsh light. The king descended from his throne, not into the pit, but to a dais overlooking it. Cloaked in crimson, his crown gleamed with jewels that caught the sun like fire. His presence alone silenced the crowd, his voice carrying with effortless authority. "So this is the girl who tames the beast," he said, his tone half amusement, half scorn. "The crowd calls you his lover. I would call you his leash." Elara's jaw trembled, but she lifted her chin. "He is no beast. He is Kaelen, a man cursed, but still a man." The king smirked, leaning forward as if to savor her defiance. "A man? Very well. Then prove your faith. Here and now you will choose. Betray him, name him monster, and I will grant you mercy. Refuse, and both of you will die before the day ends." The crowd murmured, anticipation thick as smoke. All eyes fixed on her. The poor girl from the forest, trembling but unbroken. Elara's heart thudded painfully. She saw Kaelen kneeling in chains, blood soaking his torn shirt, his eyes downcast as though awaiting her betrayal. She could feel his shame, his fear of dragging her into ruin. But when her gaze met his, something inside her steadied. She stepped forward, her voice ringing across the arena. "I will never betray him. If death is the price of loyalty, then so be it. I swear my life to Kaelen." Gasps rippled through the stands. Some jeered, others laughed, but a few murmured in awe. The king's smile sharpened like a blade. "Loyalty," he said softly, "is a beautiful lie. Let us test its truth." He raised a hand, and the herald stepped forward with a scroll. "Bring forth the cursed ones," the king commanded. "Let the wolf fight not beasts, but his own kind." Kaelen's head snapped up, his eyes widening in horror. The gates groaned, and from the shadows emerged figures chained and scarred. Other shifters, broken by whips, their golden eyes dimmed but still burning with fragments of spirit. The crowd erupted in bloodthirsty cheers. Elara's breath caught in her throat as Kaelen's chains were unshackled and a sword thrust into his hand. His fingers curled around the hilt, heavy with dread. The king's voice was ice. "Fight them to the death, cursed wolf. Spare no kin, or watch the girl die screaming before you." Kaelen stood frozen, his blade trembling, as the first of his kind staggered into the pit, forced to face him, their brother in curse, while Elara's life hung in the balance above. The arena's gates groaned again, their iron mouths spewing another victim into the pit. Dust swirled as chains clattered, and Kaelen froze, his breath leaving him like a struck bell. The man before him was leaner, scarred, his golden eyes dulled with years of torment. But Kaelen knew that face, etched in memory, carried through countless nights of grief. "Ronan!" His voice cracked. "Brother!" The crowd erupted, sensing the tension. "Fight! Fight!" they chanted, their lust for blood drowning the shock that bound the two men together. Ronan lifted his head, recognition dawning. For a heartbeat, pain flickered in his eyes before he laughed bitterly, the sound raw and broken. "So, it is true. They chained the wolf of the north, and now they pit us like dogs before their feast." Kaelen dropped his blade, the sword striking the dust with a hollow clang. "I will not fight you. Not after all I lost to find you." The king rose slightly, interest glinting in his gaze. "Ah, a reunion. How touching. But there is no place for sentiment in my arena. Fight, or she dies." He gestured toward Elara, held captive by guards at the edge of the dais. Kaelen's jaw clenched, his heart torn. Elara's eyes begged him not to yield to cruelty. Yet Ronan shook his head slowly, stepping forward, his chains dragging through the dirt. "We will not be their jesters," Ronan said, voice hoarse but resolute. "If they want blood, let them drink their own laughter." He lifted his arms, spreading them wide, refusing the fight. Kaelen mirrored him, standing tall, his chest bare to the crowd. Brothers not in battle, but in defiance. The arena fell into uneasy silence. Some spectators jeered at the refusal, others shifted uncomfortably, sensing something more sacred than blood sport unfolding before them. The king's face hardened, his amusement curdling into wrath. So be it. He raised his hand. Archers stationed along the walls drew back their bows, silver-tipped arrows gleaming in the sun. Kaelen's cry split the air. No! The first volley loosed. Ronan jerked as shafts tore into his chest, silver burning like fire in his veins. His knees buckled, blood soaking the dust. Kaelen lunged, catching him as he fell, his arms cradling the brother he had thought forever lost. Ronan's hand trembled, reaching for Kaelen's face. Do not let them break you, he whispered, his voice fading with the light in his eyes. Kaelen roared in anguish as Ronan's body went limp in his arms, silver arrows still quivering in his flesh. While above, the king smiled coldly, savoring the wolf's breaking heart. Kaelen's roar still echoed in the arena when the curse surged through his veins. Chains snapped like brittle twigs, iron gates shuddered, and guards scattered as the wolf's fury broke free. Dust and screams filled the air as Kaelen swept Elara into his arms, leaping from the pit. Arrows whistled past, blades slashed at his back, but his strength, born of grief and wrath, carried them through the chaos. The city fell into uproar, streets clogged with terrified citizens as Kaelen tore through alleys and market squares, Elara clinging to him with desperate faith. Bells tolled from every tower, calling soldiers to arms. By the time they reached the walls, fires already licked the rooftops, spreading in the wake of their escape. Outside the gates, the kingdom's fury gave chase. Riders thundered after them, torches blazing, arrows raining down. Each night they fled deeper into the countryside. Each dawn brought fresh skirmishes. Villages along their path, caught between loyalty and fear, paid the price, burned to ash by soldiers who blamed their people for harboring the fugitives. Elara's heart shattered with every plume of smoke they left behind. It's not just us they want, she whispered one night as they crouched in a ruined barn. It's anyone who dares show mercy. They're destroying everything. Kaelen's golden eyes glowed faint in the dark, haunted and hollow. They will never stop, Elara, not until my blood stains the earth. Still, she pressed her hand to his, firm. Then we will run until the stars fall if we must. I will not let them take you. But the kingdom was vast, its reach merciless. One evening, as they fled through a forest shrouded in mist, horns blared in every direction. Soldiers poured from the trees, cutting off their escape. Kaelen fought like a storm unleashed. Swords shattered, men fell, the earth itself trembling under his rage. Then a cry pierced through the clash of steel. Elara! In the chaos, soldiers had swarmed her. Though she struck and kicked, their numbers overwhelmed her. Shackles clamped on her wrists, rough hands dragged her away. Kaelen turned, bloodied and frantic, but a volley of arrows drove him back, pinning him behind a wall of fire and steel. Her voice broke as they dragged her into the shadows. Kaelen! His answering roar shook the forest, but he could not reach her. Smoke swallowed her figure, and when the mist cleared, she was gone. Alone amid the dead and burning woods, Kaelen sank to his knees, his claws sinking into the earth. Elara was captured, and the kingdom would use her as bait to finally break the cursed wolf. The kingdom did not hide their prize. Elara was paraded through the capital in chains, her torn dress a cruel spectacle for the crowd. The beasts love her, the people jeered, though many turned their faces away in shame. She bore it in silence, her eyes searching the horizon for the one she knew was watching. Kaelen saw her from the forest's edge. His body was ragged with wounds, his spirit frayed by grief. Every instinct urged him to storm the walls, to tear apart stone and steel. But he knew the truth. She would die before he reached her. So when the king's herald declared, "Let the cursed wolf surrender, and the girl's life will be spared," Kaelen did not hesitate. Under moonlight, he walked alone into the city gates, bare of weapon, his chains dragging in memory. The people gasped as he knelt before the soldiers, arms raised in surrender. Golden eyes dimmed, he bowed his head, not in defeat, but in devotion. They branded him before the crowd, the iron searing his flesh with the king's sigil. The stench of burning skin filled the air as Kaelen did not cry out, though his body shook with agony. "See how the beast breaks," the herald mocked, and the mob roared approval. In the dungeons, the cruelty worsened. Chains were riveted to the stone, biting into his wrists and ankles. Whips laced with silver carved into his back until the floor ran red. They demanded he renounce her, that he curse her name and admit his love was weakness. Kaelen only whispered through clenched teeth, "She is my strength." Elara, locked in an upper chamber, heard his cries echo through the night. Each lash cut her soul deeper than his flesh. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed her hands against the cold bars, whispering, "Hold on, Kaelen, please." Days passed in torment until the night came when the guards, drunk and careless, let the dungeons sink into silence. Moonlight spilled through cracks in the stone. Elara, thin and pale but unbroken, slipped from her chamber with stolen keys and trembling hands. Her feet carried her down narrow stairs, past sleeping guards, into the depths where Kaelen hung in chains. His head was bowed, his body a ruin of blood and scars, but at the sound of her steps, his golden eyes flickered faintly open. "Elara?" His voice was a rasp, weak yet filled with wonder. Elara pressed her fingers to the locks, whispering through her tears, "I'm here to set you free." Unaware that shadows moved in the dark, and unseen eyes watched her every step. The dungeon smelled of rust, blood, and damp stone. Kaelen hung from the wall, his chains biting into his wrists, every breath shallow with pain. Elara knelt before him, her trembling hands fumbling with the locks. Moonlight touched her face through the barred window, streaked with dirt and tears, but her eyes burned bright with determination. "You shouldn't be here," Kaelen rasped, though his gaze softened at the sight of her. "If they find you—" "They already have me," Elara whispered, her voice breaking. "Every day since they took you, I've been in chains too. Not of iron, but of fear." She pressed her hands to his, though the cold metal separated them. "I can't keep silent anymore, Kaelen. I love you." The words hung in the damp air, fragile yet fierce, piercing deeper than any blade. Kaelen's breath shuddered, his golden eyes glimmering even through exhaustion. "Elara." She leaned closer, tears trailing down her cheeks. "I don't care about curses or kings or what names they throw at me. You are not a beast. You are the man who saved me, who saved children, who carries more pain than anyone should, and still chooses to protect. If loving you destroys me, then let it. I will not turn away." His chains rattled as he bowed his head, his forehead pressing weakly against hers. "You do not understand what you've chosen," he whispered. "My curse is no simple wound. It devours everything, my past, my future. If you walk this path, you will lose your family, your home, even your life." Elara's hand cupped his scarred face, defiant through her tears. "Then let me lose it all. For you, Kaelen, I would rather walk into ruin than live a lifetime in safety without you." For a moment, the world narrowed to their breaths, their hearts. Kaelen's chest ached, not from wounds, but from the terrible, wondrous weight of her love. For the first time in years, he let himself believe he was more than chains, more than a curse. But hope is a fragile flame. The heavy slam of doors shattered the silence. Boots thundered down the stairs, torches flaring against stone walls. Shouts filled the air, soldiers swarming the dungeon with steel and fury. Kaelen jerked against his bonds, panic flooding his eyes. "Elara, go!" But Elara clung to him, refusing to move, her voice steady even as footsteps closed in. "I will not leave you again." The dungeon doors burst open, soldiers flooding in with blades drawn. Elara shielded Kaelen with her body as the captain sneered, "The king wants his beast, and his lover." The dungeon rang with steel and shouts as soldiers poured into the chamber. Elara clutched Kaelen's chains, refusing to move even as blades drew closer. Kaelen strained against his bonds, fury blazing, but every link held fast. Then the air trembled. A glow flickered along Kaelen's chest, where the brand burned into his skin. Heat spread through the chains, not from pain, but from something older, something fierce. His breath caught as he remembered Ronan's final words. "Do not let them break you." In that moment, the brand seared with fire not of the king, but of his brother. Wolf fire, Ronan's last gift, buried deep in blood and spirit, awakened. The chains glowed red, then burst, molten metal spraying like sparks. Kaelen's roar filled the dungeon as he broke free, his eyes blazing brighter than ever before. "Kaelen!" Elara gasped, stumbling back as the wolf fire surged around him, painting the walls with streaks of white-hot flame. Soldiers faltered, fear rippling through their ranks. "Witchcraft!" one shouted, but their cries were drowned in the storm. Kaelen seized Elara, holding her close as he carved a path through their enemies. Every swing of his arm, every leap of his body carried the fire, scattering men like leaves. They fled through corridors engulfed in chaos, torches falling, stone cracking under the unnatural blaze. The castle itself seemed to tremble, its foundations groaning against the storm. Behind them, the king's voice thundered with rage. "Do not let them escape! Bring me their heads!" Elara's breath came ragged as Kaelen pulled her through the outer gates. The night air was sharp with smoke, the city below lit by fire. They raced across rooftops and alleys, hunted by shadows, arrows raining from the walls. Yet Ronan's fire clung to Kaelen, shielding them, a burning promise that his brother's sacrifice would not be in vain. Hope flared. For the first time, escape felt possible. But hope is cruel. As they reached the forest's edge, a faint whistle split the night. Elara gasped, her body jerking as a dart struck her neck. Her hand flew up, pulling it free. The tip glistened with black poison. "Elara!" Kaelen's voice shattered as she staggered in his arms, her strength collapsing. The glow of wolf fire dimmed as panic choked him, his fury powerless against the venom already coursing through her veins. Elara's eyes fluttered closed, her body going limp as Kaelen cradled her in the burning night. Around them, the king's hunters closed in, their laughter echoing through the trees. Kaelen ran through the forest, Elara limp in his arms, her breaths shallow and uneven. The poison raced faster than her body could resist, dark veins spreading beneath her skin like black roots. He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering, "Stay with me, Elara. Please, stay." But time was bleeding away. He sought every healer, every hidden grove, every whisper of magic the old lands had ever held. Doors slammed, fearful eyes turned away. None would touch the beast or his dying companion. The hunter's horns echoed in the distance closer each hour, yet Kaelen pressed on, ignoring exhaustion, driven only by the faltering heartbeat against his chest. At last, in a ruined chapel deep within the forest, he found her. An old seer, blind but with eyes that saw more than sight. She listened to his plea, her hands hovering over Elara's fading form. Silence stretched until Kaelen's chest felt hollow. Then she spoke. "The venom is no simple poison. It binds to her spirit, leeching her life. No herb will mend it. Only one thing may. Kaelen's claws dug into the stone floor. "Tell me." The seer's head tilted, as if weighing his soul. "Her cure lies within you. Your curse is the poison's anchor. Break the curse, and she will live." His heart stilled. For years he had longed for release from the chains of beast and blood. Yet now the truth cut cruelly. Breaking it meant giving up everything. How? His voice was raw, torn between dread and hope. The seer's answer fell like a death knell. "You must surrender your bond to the wolf. To do so is to surrender yourself. Only then will her breath return." Kaelen stared at Elara, her lashes trembling, lips pale. Memories surged, her hand steadying him in chains, her voice calling him back from the edge, her confession whispered in the dark. She had chosen him when the world called him monster. Now fate demanded he choose her above himself. But choosing her meant his end. Kaelen bowed his head, tears cutting through grime and ash. He kissed her hand, trembling. "If my life is the price for yours, then so be it." As Kaelen prepares to sever the wolf from his soul, the hunter's horns blare outside the chapel. Steel rattles against the doors. He has only moments to decide: save Elara by sacrificing himself, or fight for both their lives and risk losing her forever. The chapel shook as hunters battered the doors, but Kaelen heard nothing except the rasp of Elara's shallow breaths. Her fragile chest rose unevenly against his arm. Each pause was a dagger, each whisper of air a miracle too fragile to last. The old seer's voice, calm and merciless, echoed through the chamber. "You were cursed not merely to walk as beast and man. Your burden was chosen long before you were born. The wolf inside you is no punishment. It is a vessel. You were marked to bear the suffering of others." Kaelen froze, disbelief ripping through him. "What are you saying?" The seer's empty eyes turned toward him. "Every wound, every fever, every poison that strikes those bound to your fate, you take it into yourself. That is why the girl weakens. The venom claws at her spirit, but it clings to you through the bond you forged when she called you back in the arena. You share her pain, yet she carries what you cannot suppress." Kaelen's breath caught. He looked down at Elara, her hand limp in his, skin as cold as morning frost. The truth rang cruelly clear. To heal her, he must draw the poison fully into himself. And once he did, there would be no return. His mind roared with denial. He had fought battles, endured chains, borne the mockery of men who spat at his name. He could survive it all, but not this, not losing her. The pounding at the chapel door grew louder. Splinters rained across the floor. Kaelen barely heard. His thoughts were only of her laughter when she fed him scraps by the fire, of her trembling hand reaching through iron bars, of the courage in her eyes when she confessed her love. She had given him back his humanity, and now, to repay her, he had to surrender it forever. The seer's words sealed it. "If you choose to bear her poison, her heart will beat again, but yours will not." Kaelen bowed his head, tears striking her cheek. "Then my choice is made." His voice was steady, though his body trembled. "Let her live, even if I fall." As the chapel doors shatter and hunters surge inside, Kaelen closes his eyes, silently deciding to take the poison into himself. In the next heartbeat, his golden eyes blaze, not with rage, but with the calm acceptance of a man who has chosen to die for love. The chapel doors crashed inward. Hunters stormed through, blades flashing, torches spitting sparks against the stone. Yet Kaelen no longer saw them. His world had narrowed to the fragile figure in his arms, the girl who had given him warmth in chains, laughter in darkness, and love when the world spat only hate. "Elara," he whispered, brushing a trembling hand against her face. Her lips were pale, her breath a thread. He knew she could not hear him, but still, he spoke, as though the words might reach her spirit where his strength could not. "They call me beast, monster, cursed, but you called me human. You gave me back a soul I thought long dead, and now I give that soul to you." Hunters advanced, circling, but Kaelen bent low, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was no longer a promise, but a farewell. As their mouths met, a searing light pulsed from his chest. Wolf fire, golden and blinding. It coursed into Elara, flowing like a river of warmth, driving out the venom that had darkened her veins. Her body arched in his arms as color returned to her cheeks, her breath catching with sudden strength. But Kaelen felt the price instantly. The fire drained from him with every heartbeat, his limbs weakening, his chest hollowing. His humanity unraveled thread by thread, leaving the beast behind. His eyes glowed brighter, not with fury, but with the fading remnants of the man who had chosen love over life. The hunters faltered, shielding their eyes from the blaze, unsure whether to strike or flee. In that moment, Kaelen held her tighter, pressing his forehead to hers. "Live, Elara. Live for us both." Her eyelids fluttered, her fingers twitched in his grasp, and then, her eyes opened, bright with confusion, then dawning horror as she realized what he had done. "Kaelen, no!" Her voice cracked, raw with grief. He tried to smile, though his body trembled violently. Already his skin shimmered as fur spread across it, his form breaking apart. Not the controlled shifting of a cursed warrior, but a final unraveling, the wolf claiming what remained as the man slipped away. Elara clutched him desperately as Kaelen's golden eyes dimmed, his features fading into the full form of the beast. She screamed his name, but he could no longer answer. His body was there, but the man she loved was slipping into shadow. The night sky wept silver as clouds broke, moonlight flooding the ruined chapel. Kaelen lay in Elara's arms, his body trembling with the last remnants of life. His golden eyes, once fierce and unyielding, now dimmed like dying embers. The hunters who had stormed in froze at the sight before them. They had come to slay a monster, yet what they saw was no beast tearing flesh, but a man, broken, fading, surrendering himself for the life of a girl. Their torches wavered, their blades lowered. One by one they realized the truth. The seer's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Behold the one you called cursed. He bore your hatred. He carried your chains. And even as you spat on his name, he gave his life for one of your own." Shame rippled through the soldiers, then beyond, as word spread across the villages and the city. Mothers whispered the tale to children with tears in their eyes. Fathers bowed their heads in silence. Even the nobles who once delighted in Kaelen's suffering in the arena felt a shadow settle on their hearts. The people wept, not for a beast, but for a protector they had never deserved. But none wept more than Elara. She pressed her forehead to Kaelen's, rocking him gently as though she could coax him back. His breaths were shallow, his heartbeat faint, his body shifting between man and wolf as if even death could not decide what he truly was. "You can't leave me," she whispered, her tears falling onto his chest. "You promised me fire, remember? You promised me tomorrow." Her voice broke, carried on the wind that howled through the broken chapel walls. Around them, the hunters lowered their weapons completely. Some sank to their knees. Others turned away, unable to watch the price of their cruelty. Yet none dared to move against Elara as she held him, her cries echoing like a dirge. The moon climbed higher, casting a pale glow over Kaelen's fading form. His hand twitched weakly, brushing her cheek one last time, then falling limp. Elara clutched his body to her chest beneath the silver light, her voice breaking into the night. The kingdom watched in silence as the girl who had loved a cursed wolf wept beneath the moon, cradling the man they had all lost too late. The kingdom had known many tales of monsters, but none like his. Within days, Kaelen's sacrifice spread from village to village, whispered in taverns, echoed in marketplaces, carried on the lips of children who once hid from shadows. The cursed wolf was no longer spoken of as a beast, but as a guardian who bore chains so others could be free. And always, at the heart of the tale, was Elara. She walked from hamlet to city, her steps slow but unwavering, carrying his story as though it were the last ember of a fire she refused to let die. She told of the night he collapsed in the storm, of the loyalty that never wavered, of the choice he made in the chapel when death pressed at the doors. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried the weight of 1,000 storms. The people listened. Some wept openly, some knelt in shame. Slowly, walls of hatred crumbled. Where Kaelen had been caged and mocked, the villagers now raised stones of remembrance. In the city square where he once fought in chains, a shrine rose, simple, yet radiant. Upon it lay flowers, carvings of wolves, and candles lit at dusk by trembling hands. They named him the Silent Protector. Elara stood often before the shrine, her cloak billowing in the evening wind, her fingers brushing the cold stone. She did not ask the people to honor him. They chose it themselves, out of guilt, out of sorrow, out of love born too late. Yet she carried no anger, only a quiet vow. You will not be forgotten, Kaelen. As long as I breathe, they will remember you. And so she kept walking, her voice carrying through the villages like a prayer. But grief has a strange way of speaking. On the coldest nights, when the moon climbed high and the forests whispered, Elara would pause. She would lift her face to the wind, her heart aching. And then, soft, distant, mournful, she would hear it. A wolf's howl rising through the night air, low and familiar, brushing her soul like a memory too real to deny. Her breath caught every time. Tears would blur her eyes, but she would smile, whispering into the dark, I hear you, Kaelen. Beneath the silver moon, the kingdom mourned a fallen guardian. But Elara knew the truth in her heart. The beast's legacy lived on, not only in stone and stories, but in the echo of a wolf's song that would never fade.